أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So, when we read the life of the Prophet ﷺ, we see a person that is clearly standing out in the history of mankind. Somebody that no one else really is near that example. So we are supposed to strive and to follow him and to live a life that is reflecting a love and a devotion to him as a prophet. So when we look at the lives of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, we have to realize that these are not prophets. They had mistakes, they had sins, they're human beings. Some people exaggerate about them. We should not do that. And their level of piety and righteousness is something amazing, something that we should all aspire to have. So when we look at those people who are most closest to the Prophet ﷺ, those people that lived with him, those people that took from him, we will start to see how their faith was so fortified and so strong and so deep and so reverent. And then we can take from that faith, because we are seeing an example that is a proof. So the companions who were closest to the Prophet ﷺ, they are a proof of the religion. Because had they had any doubt in their mind about his being the Prophet, they would not have gone through such lengths. They would not have gone through so much difficulty and hardship and challenge as a result. So we talked a little bit last week about Ali and how he was born and where he came from and his name and his family. Mashallah, he had 32 kids. Mashallah.
9 wives, right?
19 wives.
19.
Fatima is husband?
Yes, Fatima was his first wife. And some narrations show that it wasn't until she passed away that he married other. Other narrations seem to show that he had other wives.
So how old he was when Fatima passed away?
He would have been around 30. Would have
So-
been around 30. Yeah.
How did you have a 19? Isn't there?
Well, over different times and stuff.
Oh, but is there a limit to 4?
4, yes.
Yes.
He never had more than 4.
Okay.
And also, there's a debate about some. Is that a wife, or was she a servant, and then because she was freed as a result of carrying the child and some things like this? So that's where all that comes from. So one of the things that really bothers anybody who's reading Sirah is that from the period of the Prophet receiving revelation in the mountain, on Ghar Hira, and then to Hijrah, it's fragmented stories that aren't very strong chronological messaging, right? The reason for this is the mentality of the Arabs. The Arabs remembered big events, and of course a war is a big event. So most people, when they read the biography, they see Badr, Uhud, Khandaq. Now seems like there's an order here, right? Hudaybiyah and Fath and Hunayn and all of that, Tabuk. So unfortunately, they did not remember or record the things that were happening when they were just a small group in Medina in some sort of yearly, orderly. It was just generally, here's what we were going through. So everything that applied to everyone else also applies to Ali radiallahu anhu, except much less because he is the son of Abu Talib, right? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ went through a lot less than other of the companions, because Abu Talib was a very respected elder and wise man of the Quraysh. But one of the stories that we have in Ali's time when he was, who can remember how old he was when the Prophet ﷺ received revelation?
10.
He was like 10 years old. This is the stronger majority opinion. So there is basically a few years after that Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, he started to work and to do things as like a teenager, mashallah. So there was a man named Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. Abu Dharr was a guy who is from the tribe of Ghifar, which is, there's an area outside of Mecca, some ways a little bit north. And they didn't have a good name for themselves. Some of them were like gangsters. They would cut off the caravans and take from them. But Abu Dharr was one that was quite unique among them. He was a person that thought for himself. So he never worshipped idols in his life. This is his own narration. Abu Dhar never worshipped idols. He never was, believing in all the superstitions and things like this. He knew that God was one. He used to make prostrations to God whenever he was a young person. So one day his younger brother, his name is Anis, he was saying that there is stories that I'm hearing of a prophet who has come out of Mecca. And he is getting revelations and he's calling to one God and he has some sort of message. So Abu Dhar said, okay, can you go try to meet him? He has his family and business and things like he's doing, so he couldn't go himself. So he said, Anis, can you go into Mecca, meet this guy, listen to him, see what he's saying, let me know if it's something, interesting. So Anis goes in there and he finds the Prophet ﷺ and he talks to him and he listens to some Quran and he's amazed to hear this. And so he comes back to Abu Dhar. He says, Abu Dhar, he says, this is a man who's very firmly believing in the oneness of God. We don't worship anything other than Allah, and we are people who are set on values, people who are sitting on a structure of life that is built upon being resurrected when we die, and that we're accountable. So we have to live a lifestyle that reflects that. And he has this language and this message that is not like poetry, but is like nothing you've ever heard. So Abu Dhar said, well, this is interesting stuff, but I still want to get to know this guy. I want to meet him. So Abu Dhar said, look, Anis, you're going to stay with my family for a few days. I'm going to travel into Mecca. So Abu Dhar, he goes into Mecca, and he is looking around. And the way things were, if you were a stranger and you really didn't have some serious business, some arranged business, then you would kind of hang around the Kaaba. That area, the courtyard around the Kaaba, what we call the Masjid al-Haram now. So, and back then they had around the Kaaba, they would have tents and kind of like club huts where different tribes would go. So people who weren't from those tribes, they were not welcome there. Unless you were had a lot of money or something, or you were from the tribe or had some reason to be there. So he'd just hang around by the Kaaba and things like this. And, it gets nighttime, and he's laying against the Kaaba. So Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, he sees him, and he says, just by chance, he says, do you have any business here? He was like, no, I'm just kind of coming through, He was like, how about you come stay with me? Right? Now here's an interesting point when you read this story. It would seem that, because Abu Dhar claims he was one of the first believers, but it can't be that, because then Ali would have been 10 or 11. And he says, come to my house and stay with me, right? So it has to be some years after that, when he's living in his own house, okay? I'm thinking 3, 4 years, 5 years, something like this. Because back then, if you worked and you were doing your thing, you could form, make your own little place and so forth. Other than that, maybe the Prophet is not around, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he's taking him actually to his room, his hujra, which is with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's house. So at any rate, he took Abu Dhar, he said, you can stay in my house, no questions asked. Very hospitable, good character. And so he took care of him, gave him some food and some drink and everything. Now the next day, Abu Dhar doesn't want to bother people, he leaves. He goes back to the Kaaba and everything, and the day goes by, and then I've never thought he's the same guy, he's just there, now he's going to sleep against the Kaaba. He's not, he could have came to me, he knows where I'm at. So he goes, he said, why don't you stay with me, again, no problem, I don't mind, I'll keep you, you can stay in my home. So he comes there. And so, in the morning, he says, it's kind of strange that, I'm welcoming you in, we're visiting, but you don't want to talk about anything about your situation. And he said, well, it is a very specific thing, and I don't want to create a problem. He was like, oh, there's no problem. And so Abu Dhar just decided to come off. He said, I'm looking for this guy who says he's the Prophet. So the narrator said that Ali got, his face lit up. He's like, oh wow. He says, I know him. He is the Prophet. I am his follower. He said, okay. He said, I can take you to him, but we have to be discreet. You're right. People are concerned about this. So Abu Dhar knows this guy is good. He's on the inside. So Ali radiallahu anhu, he says, I'm going to walk and you stay a little bit behind me. And if you see me stop, then kind of walk in another direction. I'll stop like I'm getting some water or something like this. And so he's walking and all of that. They get to the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Dharr said, I saw him and he's just this, you can see him. He looks something special. So I called upon him. Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. And the narration says that before then, salam had not become institutionalized as a reality of greetings of Muslims. So he told him, wa alaykum as-salam and all of that, and then later Muslims all started to use this phrase. SubhanAllah. So Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu, he says, I've heard about you, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? And he says, okay. He says, I am the messenger of God. I have been called to teach people about the oneness of God, that you will be resurrected, you will be accountable, and so forth. So he is visiting with him. He read some Quran to him, and Abu Dharr was completely in awe. He said, this is amazing. He said, I believe that you are the messenger of God. And he said, I think we should tell people. He said, I'm telling you, if you go tell people, they'll create a problem for you. This could become dangerous. Abu Dharr said, no, I think that people should see the truth in this. He said, I've always had this inside me. I know it, I'm going to go. So Abu Dharr went into around the Kaaba and he announced that he's a believer to everyone there, and they beat him badly. And then Abbas, radiallahu anh, before he was a believer, he went and he said, this is a man from Ghifar. They are a tribe that we have to do our business in Syria every year. We do not want to create a problem with their tribe, so let him go. So then let him go. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he told him, he said, go back to Ghifar, your tribe, and call them to what you know of this message. The story is that he stayed with a couple of days with the Prophet ﷺ. And so he learned whatever Quran was around. He was really adamant about learning everything. He was just completely in awe of the Quran. So he went back to find the Prophet ﷺ. He said, do not come to me until you see that I have firm footing, that my believers. So the Prophet, basically, he's believing in this man that he will be an instrumental force in bringing his whole tribe to the religion. He would not need anybody else from that tribe. Because otherwise he would come back to me because your tribe, what they might do and all that. He sees Abu Dharr as a very unique specimen. And what he thought, the Prophet ﷺ, came true. Most of the Ghifar became Muslim, and it wasn't until after the Battle of Khandaq that the Ghifar as a whole group came to Medina. MashaAllah. So that's kind of Ali. It was by divine decree. People say by chance, but it was divine decree that Ali would find him. But the character and the wisdom that he had as a boy. Imagine he's a boy, right? He's just a little boy, but he's very careful to protect the sanctity of the believers and the prophetic, sacredness. He was very careful about all of that. And that just shows that he already was becoming far beyond his years maturity-wise. So Ali radiallahu anhu, he narrates another example. When they were going to the Hajj, called Tawaf al-Qada'il. The Hajj groups would come in from everywhere. And the Prophet ﷺ would introduce them. So this is towards the end of the Meccan period. And the Muslims are going through all kinds of abuse and this boycott and all of these terrible things. So Ali says, the Prophet ﷺ invited me and Abu Bakr to go with him to be his right-hand men in inviting people and trying to find some group that would be able to take us in. They're trying to make an exit at this point. They're trying to migrate somewhere. So they get settled in a place and they see a good, gathering of people come, and these men look very well dressed, some very nice clothing, some wearing Persian clothing. And so then Abu Bakr says, I think I know who these people are. I think this is Banu Shayban ibn Talib. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, go ahead. So then Ali narrates, he said, Abu Bakr, among all of the companions, was the most personable, to know people, and he was very well trained to know the lineage and the tribal customs and the tribal orders and who's what and all of that. When he was young, he learned all of these things. When he's traveling, he learned, and he Found it very important because it was he was basically the most well-versed politician of Arabia. Why are we saying that? Because the politics was tribal class system. That was the political system of Arabia. So Abu Bakr felt it very expedient and important to get to know every tribe and what they're about and what certain things they are and all of this and who's the names and the big figures and what, just like studying the Congress and all of this and so forth, right? So the Prophet ﷺ told him, he said, I don't know who these people are. So he told Abu Bakr to go. So Ali and the Prophet ﷺ are sitting kind of back, and Abu Bakr goes over there and he walks up to a man named Mafruq. And he says, so how are you doing and all of that, the formalities, and then he said, so are you coming from afar? And he said, yes. And he said, Bani Shayban? He said, yes. He said, yeah. He said, we're from there. And he said, oh, really? He said, so you have a large group with you, or is this everyone? He said, oh, we are a large tribe. And so Abu Bakr is talking with him, and he says, what kind of force do you represent? And he said, why? He said, well, there's that man right there. He is the Prophet ﷺ. And he has been revealed revelation from God. And we are going through all kinds of abuse and humiliation, and some of us have been tortured and all of this by these Quraysh here. And so we are trying to find somewhere to go where we can have peace. We want to peacefully practice our faith. So, Mafruq, he said, we are a very strong tribe. We are thousands. And we have, might and strength that is formidable. No one would test us. So he said, well, you should look into this message that our Prophet ﷺ has. He said, so far what you said makes sense. The values and, God is one and all of that. I've heard this before, and it makes sense to me. He's like, but you should go talk to a guy named Hani ibn Qabisa. So this guy is a religious sage he's their witch doctor, their sage amongst their tribe. So he says, take me to him. So Ali and the Prophet ﷺ come, and they said, we are here to, invite you to this message and see if there's a way that we could live peacefully among you. So Hannah said, tell me a little bit about it. So he told him what it means to bear witness that I'm, the messenger of God, God is one and all of that. And then he said, okay, I will recite to you some Quran about what are the boundaries and values that we are set with. So the famous ayah from Surah Al-An'am, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُ مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. So say to the people, come here, let me let you know what your Lord has prohibited you. أَلَّا تُشْرِكُهُ بِشَيْئًا. First thing, do not associate others in divinity or worship with God. That's the first thing. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And that you should have the highest standard of good character towards your parents. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ. And do not kill your kids in fear of poverty. نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ. We will provide for you and them as well. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الْفَوَاحِشَ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ. Do not come close to filthy, shameful immorality, whether it be in public or in private. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. Do not kill a soul without just right, and this is something that is advised to you for people of understanding. So he said, wow. He said, that is deep, that is some powerful language and all of that. He said, tell me something else. So then the Prophet ﷺ recited to him the famous ayah about Sharia. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ يَعِظُكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. That God is commanding towards justice. We should establish justice. And we should go further than that in being altruistic. We should give out of our time, our wealth, our skills to help other people and to add value to other people's lives. And so then he said, this is amazing stuff. Everything you're saying makes sense. These are only the most noble of values, but I can't just make a decision for my whole tribe about a whole new religious way in one meeting with someone. So you'd have to give us a chance. Maybe if you'll talk to Muthanna bin Haritha, he is like our main tribal head of the war and the general and all that. He is responsible for the thing you're talking about, which is protection. So Muthanna, Prophet ﷺ meets him, Abu Bakr and Ali, Assalamu alaikum, all of that, nice to meet you and all of this. And Muthanna listens to the thing. He said, this is some very powerful stuff. He said, I've never heard anything like this before, and it makes a lot of sense. He was like, but here's where we're at. We have two basic realities. We are, on the north of us is Persia. We're on the border of the Persian Empire. And we have a treaty with them, and part of our treaty is that anyone who would stir up a movement of, challenging the powers that be, then you have broken this covenant. And then we have some of the Arabs to the south of us, and we are dominant over them. They would not dare give us a hard time. So he said, if you would like, we could bring you in, and we would respect you and what you're believing and all of that, but we cannot tell you, you'd have to make a deal with the Persians, because we're not in a position to tell them what to do. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I really appreciate sadaqta. You are an honest, genuine, good man. I appreciate your honesty and all of that. He said, but this religion is not up for political bargaining. If you're going to support this religion, it's only for those who are truly committed to it. And they're ready to put that before everything else. So he said, okay. He said, but let me tell you. The Prophet ﷺ said, it's authentic hadith. He said, let me tell you, Muthanna, if you look into this religion and you choose it, and you become a believer, the Persians are not a threat to you. As a matter of fact, you will walk into there one day in their palaces, owning the land as the dominant authority. And you will become the rulers of Persia. Guess who led the army against the Persian Empire? Muthanna bin Haritha. He was in the time of Umar al-Khattab. He had become believers. Most of this whole tribe of Banu Shayban had become believers. And Muthanna was one of the leaders of the army in that attack. And then he went into the Persian kingdom and Kisra and all of that. And he saw the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ happen. So these are things that they witnessed and they dealt with. And so it's something very amazing whenever you look at why these people's faith was so strong, what they witnessed. So after the death of Abu Talib, the Prophet's uncle, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this was a big hit to him and Ali, because that was their big protection. From the tribal protective standpoint, this is a very tough thing to do it. So now the Muslims were all going through boycott. There were plots to kill and assassinate the Prophet ﷺ, and luckily by divine decree and by the hard work of Mus'ab ibn Umair, the people of Yathrib have welcomed the Muslims. So the Prophet starts commanding everybody, and some of the last people, the first one to go is Umar. And he went up to he said, okay guys, I'm going the migration. If you have a problem with it, you know where I'm at. Every single other Muslim went secretly. No, people were scared of him. That's what it was. There's some of the narrations he was like almost 7 feet tall, and when he got onto a donkey, his belly would have touched the ground. Wow. Umar was a very big man. Yeah. So.
Especially like 7 feet was like a giant.
Yeah. So they said more than 2 meters. So the Prophet ﷺ, he says, look, Ali, you've been from me and with me throughout this whole thing. I need you to do me a big favor. These people are plotting to kill me, and I'm going to go with Abu Bakr on the migration. I have a couple of things I need you to do for me. He says, one, I would like you to stay in my bed so that when they check in after I sneak out, they will think for some time into the day that I'm still there. If they look through the window or whatever. Okay? That way, I can escape. And they will not be able to follow me. Because if they see early, then they will come looking for me and I will be on my journey. So he says, then, and this is, when I was researching for this particular talk, I wasn't aware of this. I'd heard that story before, but actually the Prophet ﷺ said, I have all of these things that people have given to me and entrusted to me to give back to others. So I need you to fulfill these responsibilities I've been entrusted with, some property, some notes, some things. So Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, he is ready and willing to sleep in his bed and perhaps be killed. Because if you could just imagine, what if they just come in and just start stabbing the covers? And then what if when he turns around they're so mad it's not him, they kill him? Why not? Abu Talib's dead. He doesn't have Abu Talib to protect him. And everybody's migrating away. So they're very upset that they're losing control over this Muslim problem. So Ali, radiallahu anhu, no problem. He didn't hesitate, he didn't say anything. He said, of course, Ya Rasulullah. He's ready. He has all the ayahs memorized. He knows what it means to be a person of sacrifice. Someone who is dedicated to this Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of his faith in God. So Ali sleeps in there, and then they come in the morning, and then he turns around and they're like, where is your cousin Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He said, I didn't know. Were you looking for him? He mocked them. They got very upset. What? And they beat him very badly. And then they came and they tied him up and shackled him by the Kaaba. And so then finally it was Abbas who helped him loose. So then he goes back. Look, he's been beat and all of that. He could just be like, man, this thing's crazy. I'm going to Medina. He didn't have anything. He is going to fulfill the request of the Prophet ﷺ if it means his death. Because some of these people and this just shows you how hypocritical the Quraysh were. Some of these people are figures from tribes who are boycotting and torturing and abusing Muslims. But they trust Muhammad more than anyone else with their stuff. So this is real. These are authentic teachings. This just shows that, there's one of us says, فَإِنَّهُمْ لَا يُكَذِّبُونَكَ وَلَكِنَّ الظَّالِمِينَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ يُكَذِّبُونَ. So it says in the ayah, they're not really, God is consoling the Prophet ﷺ, they're not really belying you or disbelieving in you, but it is by the signs of God and His religion and the message that they're having a hard time with. So Ali goes and takes all of his entrusted property and things back to its proper owners, and they're all amazed by this too. They're like, are you serious? After what you people have been through, I wouldn't expect you to bring this back. And it would make perfect sense that you just took it with you. But this is the believer. The believer, even when people are torturing and abusing them, I owe you this, I will take care of this, I will make sure I get done this responsibility and this trust and fulfill it to its proper owner. So then Ali had done, he's going to go on his hijrah. And I did not know about this. Ali, radiallahu anhu, did not have a horse or a camel to his name. He went in sandals, all by himself, with just some water and some minor crumbs with him. If you've been in a bus from Mecca to Medina, it's like 4 some hours. Imagine, it's like 2 days walking, 3 days, if you're walking almost a day. And he's going, and it says his ankles and his soles of his feet were cracking and sore, and whenever he finally came, he couldn't even make it into, he just willed it by faith and by reliance. He got to Quba, and he's met the people there, and they have a mosque there, so he's like, okay, there's a mosque, I'll do that, pray here, visit, sit down, relax. So he relaxed for a little bit, and it was a whole other day he needed a relaxation just to get into Medina from there. So that's Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. This is, the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what they lived, what they went through, what they saw, what they witnessed. It was something, very special. So whenever the Quran says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ بِابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ, Wallahu ra'ufun bil ibad. That there are people who have sold their own attachment to their self for the pleasure of Allah. This is something they have done. And you see it from many of the companions. Some scholars said this was narrated by Ali ibn Abi Talib, willing to sleep in the bed of the Prophet ﷺ. That they are putting everything in this world under and behind the pleasure of Allah, and the following and the defense and the promotion of the prophetic legacy. So this is inshallah today's portion. Inshallah next week we can talk about how his relationship was with the Quran. He was one of those few people who memorized and wrote down the whole Quran in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. There was a handful of these people.